Hi everyone, my name is Julia. Hope you're having a fantastic day. We're back again with another episode of Learn Mandarin with Commercials. Today, we're going to be looking at a popular Volkswagen commercial so that you can learn simple business terms and vocabulary.
这个周末要完成报告，谁可以加班？
我。
很好。那你陪我打高尔夫球了？
好的。
Volkswagen, das Auto.
Poor guy, right? So let's talk about what we saw. The commercial is set in a conference room. If you work in an office, you probably use one every day. We call this a 会议室. 会议 meaning meeting or conference. 室 meaning room. For example, an office is a 办公室. A classroom is a 教室. Next, we see two men in the conference room. They are sitting across from one another. One of them is flustered and stressed out. He constantly looks over at his colleague, seemingly competing with him, but his colleague just looks relaxed and not at all bothered. 同事 is what we call colleague. 同 means the same, which makes sense as you and your colleague are neither inferior or superior to each other in rank. At this point, the boss walks in. In Mandarin, a boss is 老板. Sometimes, however, we don't call our superiors boss, but rather manager. 经理. So now we've learned two ways of addressing your boss or manager. 老板, 经理. The boss says to the two men, 这个周末要完成报告.
这个周末要完成报告。
周末 means weekend. 这个 means this. Therefore, 这个周末 means this weekend. Let's use some of the words we learned previously. For example, what do you think this means? 这个老板. Exactly, this boss. Now let's move on to the rest of that sentence. 这个周末要完成报告. 完成 means to finish. What are we finishing here? The answer is 报告, which means report. So the boss is asking for the report to be finished this weekend. Did you get that? Great, let's move on. The boss continues speaking. He says, 谁可以加班?
谁可以加班？
Now, if you're like me, you might not want to hear the words 加班, which translated directly means to add work. In English, it simply means to work late. 可以 means can or able to. 不可以 means cannot or unable to. So often you might hear Chinese speakers say 可以吗? Meaning, is that okay? 谁 means who. This is a question word you will hear a lot. For example, earlier we learned that 这个 means this, right? A question you might hear a lot is 这个是谁? Who is this? You might also hear 谁的? Who does this belong to? Upon hearing this question, both men raise their hands, but the frustrated competitive colleague rushes to volunteer by saying 我 me.
谁可以加班？
我。
He looks over at the other colleague, triumphant at his win, while the boss says 很好. Very good.
很好。
But then the boss takes out some Volkswagen keys and says to the other colleague, 那你陪我打高尔夫球了?
那你陪我打高尔夫球了？
高尔夫球 is golf. This is a direct translation based on the sound of the word in English, as it is a Western sport after all. 打 in this context means to play. Whenever we play any sport with a ball, we use this word. 打 also means to hit. Pei comes from the phrase 陪伴, which means to accompany. Last but not least, you might notice the la sound at the end of the sentence. This is an exclamative word that we often see in Mandarin. These words add to the mood but do not bear much meaning in itself as a character. So let's look at the phrase again. 那你陪我打高尔夫球啦? This sentence means, well, you will play golf with me then. The other colleague beams with pleasure as he catches the keys thrown to him by the boss and proceeds to collect his things while his competitive colleague looks on disappointed. So everyone, did you enjoy that video? Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Learn Mandarin from Commercials. My name is Julia, and see you next time. Bye!
Chinese pod.